Hey everyone! Today we will be finishing the Language of Business section. So this is Language of Business Part 2 for the online lectures. And tonight we will be talking about writing techniques, sentence unity, and editing. All right, so let's get started. Starting with writing techniques. Okay, so writers can significantly improve their message by focusing on a few writing techniques, such as emphasizing or de-emphasizing ideas, using the active and the passive voices, and developing parallelism in their writing. That's a hard word to say, parallelism. We'll be practicing that in class. All right, so looking at emphasis. When you are talking with someone, you can emphasize your main ideas by saying them loudly or by repeating them very slowly or modulating your voice, making it really high or really low, depending on the message that you're trying to send. You can sound really happy or kind of sad, and I don't know. There's a lot of things we can do with our voice when we're talking with people, and our body language, of course. But other ways that you can signal the relative importance of an idea is by, of course, raising your eyebrows, waving your hands. Like I said, body language really affects this. But in your writing, you don't have all of these methods. And nowadays, of course, we use emoticons to try to help with this, to show that we're laughing or we're crying or something's going on. But we can't exactly do that in our business writing. We have to be more professional than using emoticons. So how do we do this in business writing? Well, emphasis, using the tools we have through our writing processors, and using these emphasis techniques will help your reader determine what the most important ideas are, what the main ideas are, what they should be focusing on, and different forms of emphasis give different impressions. So we're going to look at that now. So to emphasize an idea, a writer can underline, which draws the reader's eye, right? When the video came on and I was scrolling down and you saw this paragraph come up, you probably noticed the underline almost right away. The second thing you probably noticed was the bolded word. Of course, boldface can convey special meanings and it provides emphasis, not to mention italics on its side, which when you're reading, if you think about reading this maybe in a book or something, sometimes when you see a word in italics, you might think that they're being sarcastic or almost sassy. But other times it's just to draw your attention to show that that item is very important. So it doesn't always carry tone with it. That also depends on the structure of the sentence and the subject of your writing. You can also do font changes from, let's see here, large fonts to small fonts. Oh, I missed the last L. That's okay. Too small, or you can vary it within the word, as we see here, up and down. That also draws your attention. Don't make it too small so that people can't read it. Usually the standard is Times New Roman size 12 in Word, but depending on what your company might want you to use, or you may even use different fonts for different memos or types of letters. But just be aware that not everyone has 20/20 vision, so don't make the writing too small. Printing words in all capitals is like shouting. It's when people read that, there's a lot of emphasis there. Be careful using all capitals because it can come across as shouting and you don't want people to think that you're angry with them. Dashes, if they're used sparingly, like not crazy in a sentence, then they can be effective in capturing someone's attention. Or tabulating, listing items vertically makes them stand out. So here they have 1, 2, and 3. You can also use A, B, C. There's also the Roman numerals like the I, 2 I's, that kind of thing. Other ways to achieve mechanical emphasis or having to do it through your writing would be to arrange things with different spaces in between them, using color to draw attention, using lines, which could be maybe even arrows or underlines. Sometimes you can cross words out. Boxes, columns, titles, headings, subheadings, a lot of the things that we've already talked about as well. So there are many things you can do in your writing to provide emphasis and direct your reader's attention to certain areas. So another way to provide emphasis is to choose your words carefully and construct sentences skillfully to emphasize the main idea or de-emphasize a minor or a negative idea, which is also always great, because if you're trying to deliver a negative message or say something to your employees or your boss, you might want to de-emphasize something that's negative. So here are 4 suggestions on how to do these things. One is to use vivid words. What does this mean? Well, vivid words are emphatic because the reader can picture the ideas clearly. You'll remember back in one of the first video lectures we talked about choosing your words carefully so that a reader can picture what you're talking about. This relates back to that. So here's a general statement. Someone will contact you as soon as possible. Well, that's great, but let's make this more vivid. Let's say Mr. Stevens will telephone you before 5 p.m. on May 1st. Much better. More vivid, you have an idea of who's calling you, roughly like between 9 and 5 probably, on what day. Much better. A much clearer message, really. Another thing to do is to label the main idea. So if an idea is significant, then tell the reader. You don't always have to underline or put a bunch of exclamation marks. There's other ways to do this. So an unlabeled main idea looks like this. Consider looking for a job online, but also focus on networking. Well, if you think networking is important, then tell your reader that. So in a labeled idea, it would look more like consider looking for a job online, semicolon. But most important, focus on networking. So you can see the big difference really in the meaning and what you understand after reading it and where the emphasis lies with the punctuation that was provided in the sentence. Another thing to do is to place the important idea first or last in a sentence. So items have less competition from the surrounding words when they appear first or last in a sentence. Also, as we talked about in class, there's the primacy and the recency effect. So things that people saw first and last are what they are most likely to remember. That's usually why when you're writing essays, your first paragraph states your main idea or your thesis, and your last paragraph has to summarize your entire essay, because the beginning and the end are what people will remember the most. So observe here in this little chart how the concept of productivity is emphasized in the first and second examples. So in the emphatic, we have profit-sharing plans linked to individual performance rather than group performance are more effective in increasing productivity, versus profit sharing. Oh, I'm missing my page. Profit sharing plans are more effective in increasing productivity. Here we are. In increasing productivity when they are linked to individual performance rather than to group performance. Okay, so differences. Profit sharing plans are more effective in increasing productivity when they are linked to individual performance rather than group performance. So we have the fact at the end that profit sharing plans are most effective when they're related to individual productivity, versus the emphatic where you have the individual performance or individual productivity right up front. All right, another thing you can do is place the important idea in a simple sentence or an independent clause. So don't dilate the effect of the idea by making it share the spotlight with the other words and the other clauses. More examples. So in the emphatic, we have, although we considered many candidates, you are the first trainee that we have hired for this program. So the independent clause contains the main idea. But we want to make a main idea, we want to show what can happen when a main idea gets lost. So this would look like something like this. Although you are the first trainee that we have hired for this program, we had many other candidates, and we expect to expand the program in the future. Whew. Okay, so which one's easier to understand and which one are you more likely to remember? When you're looking at the emphatic example, or if somebody says that all of those words to you, are you really getting the main idea, or are you just getting, okay, they're going to expand the program. I was one of the first people they interviewed. Cool. Right? So just be aware that you can drown your words in other words if you're not careful. What about de-emphasizing things? Okay, so we've seen how to bring a reader's attention, how to emphasize. Let's look at de-emphasizing. So try some of the following using general words. So here's a vivid. Our records indicate that you were recently fired. Ooh, ow. That's vivid. That's kind of painful. Yeah, I was recently fired. Thanks for rubbing it in. But let's soften the blow here. Our records indicate that your employment status has changed recently. Yes, we know you were fired, but you don't want to be rude and you don't want to make the person upset. So to de-emphasize this negative thing, you can say, oh, well, we've noticed that your employment status has changed. Another thing to do for de-emphasis would be to place the bad news in a dependent clause connected to an independent clause with something positive, right? So this is going back to almost the Canadian way to give feedback, where we like to have the positive and then the negative and then a positive again. So in sentences with dependent clauses, the main emphasis is always on the independent, so on the positive. All right, let's see here. We cannot issue you credit at this time, but we have a special plan that will allow you to fill your immediate needs on a cash basis. Not bad. What happens when you de-emphasize it? Although credit cannot be issued at this time, you can fill your immediate needs on a cash basis with our special plan. Which one do you prefer? And why? Think about that when you're composing your own writing and your own messages to your consumers. So in the active voice, the subject is the doer of the action. Yes. In the passive voice, the subject is acted upon, right? So in business writing, as well as in personal interactions, some situations really do demand some sensitivity. So instead of using the direct approach with active verbs all the time, now I'm going to talk to you finally about sometimes when we should be using the passive or an indirect mode to get the message across. So rather than a blunt announcement like Tyler made a major error in the estimate, we can soften the sentence with a passive construction like a major error was made in the estimate. You'll notice when you change the construction to passive, you can omit who did it. And this is often when it is used. So here's a short summary of the best use of active voice and passive voice in writing. So you use the active voice for most business writing as we have been talking about. It clearly tells what the action is and who's performing that action. It's really simple. The reader gets it. So for example, let's say Parliament passed new laws. Voila, we get it. Good. Use the passive voice to de-emphasize an action or the recipient of the action. Like, new laws were passed by Parliament. You'll notice that when you read a sentence like this, your focus is now on the fact that new laws were passed, not by who passed them. You can also use the passive voice to de-emphasize negative news, as we've been saying, like credit cannot be granted versus something like we will not grant credit or cannot grant you credit at this time. Even that is more polite, but using the passive definitely softens the blow. And you can use the passive voice to conceal the doer of the action, like I mentioned before. Something like an error was made in projecting profits, for this year. We don't know who made the error. We don't know why. Someone could inquire about this later, but it's not important. The point is an error was made and we've got to fix this. So how can you tell when you're working with these words and writing your sentences in your paragraphs? How can you tell when to use an active versus a passive verb? Well, first you need to identify the subject of the sentence and decide whether this subject is doing the action or being acted upon. Then you might want to consider where the emphasis should lie. Is it on the action? Is it on the person or on the result? And is it negative? And do you want people to know who did the action or just what the result was? All right. Now let's look at parallelism. So parallelism is a skillful writing technique that involves balanced writing. Sentences written so that their parts are balanced or parallel are easier to read and understand. So to achieve parallel construction, use similar structures to express similar ideas. For example, the words computing, coding, recording, and storing are parallel because they all end in ing. Yes, they may have a similar meaning as well, or they're part of the same family of words, but they also all end in ing. Avoid mixing active and passive verbs. This will get very confusing. Do not mix your tenses. Your goal is to keep the wording balanced, and then when you are expressing similar ideas. Okay, so something that lacks parallelism. Our primary goals are to increase productivity, reduce costs, and the improvement of product quality. How about our primary goals are to increase productivity, reduce costs, and improve product quality. Boom, 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 like a list. No mixing. Another one. We are scheduled to meet in Dallas on January 5th. We are meeting in Montreal on the 15th of March and Chicago on June 3rd. Ew, you've got your dates all over the road here. So matching would be we are scheduled to meet in Dallas on January 5th, in Montreal on March 15th, and Chicago June 3rd. So you'll notice the difference up here. Sometimes they have January 5th, Montreal on the 15th, June 3 or June 3rd. Whereas down here, they always have month to day, month to day, month to day. When presenting a list of data, make sure that you express it in parallel. So you can either do what was up here, where you, in this sentence, where you use commas, or you can do things like 1, 2, 3, ABC, whatever works for you, but just make sure if you're listing things that it's in parallel structure. Sometimes people, when they're listing things, they start with, let's see here. Go to the store, read a book, buy groceries, shopping for a car. Okay, this list is not in parallel. There's no There's some parallelism, but not a lot. Why? As you can probably guess, because this word doesn't match the structure of the others. So just be aware of that when you're making lists. All right, and the last subject tonight is sentence unity. So unified sentences contain thoughts that are related to only one main idea. The following sentence lacks unity because the first clause has little or no relation to the second clause. All right. Our insurance plan is available in all the states and provinces, and you may name anyone as your beneficiary, as a beneficiary for your coverage. There's no unity here. So if we revise this, we might be able to say, our insurance plan is available in all the states and provinces, period. What's more, comma, you may name anyone as a beneficiary for your coverage. Okay, so again, this clause, you may name anyone as your beneficiary in the lacking unity, does not work because it has little or nothing to do with the relationship of the first clause. If that's the case, feel free to put a period in there and start a whole new sentence. The ideas are better expressed by separating the two dissimilar clauses and by adding a connecting phrase as shown above, like what's more, or also, and, all of those. Other writing faults that can destroy sentence unity are zigzag writing, mixed constructions, and misplaced modifiers, which we'll be looking at now. All right, let's move this down. So zigzag writing happens when one thought does not relate to another. If you think about what a zigzag looks like, that's the idea. We don't want that happening in your writing. So to rectify or to fix a zigzag sentence, revise it so that the reader understands the relationship between the thoughts. Nobody wants to read something and feel lost or be like, what are they talking about? So just be careful. We can't read your mind. You need to make things clear. If it's impossible to do this, then move the unrelated thoughts to a new sentence or add explanations. Add more information so that the readers will understand. So example, this is zigzag writing. I appreciate the time you spent with me in our interview last week, and I have enrolled in a Photoshop course. Revision. I appreciate the time you spent with me in our interview last week. Period. As a result of your advice, I've enrolled in a Photoshop course. So the zigzag happening up here is that you are thanking someone for their time. Oh, by the way, I enrolled in this course. That might have nothing to do with what you talked about at the interview. Even if the person knows that it does, it's still zigzag writing. Because if they advise you to join a Photoshop course and you enrolled in culinary school, that's super zigzag. But when you break it down and show that the reason you enrolled in the Photoshop course was because of their advice, now it's clear. Now we know. And anybody can read that and understand it now. It's not like just this private conversation going on between you and the person you had the interview with. Here's a look at mixed constructions. So writers who fuse two different grammatical constructions can destroy the sentence unity and its meaning. So an example of a mixed construction is the reason she was hired is because she's qualified. Okay, the revision, the reason she was hired is that she was qualified. This construction, or the construction introduced by the reason, should be a noun clause beginning with that, not an adverbial clause beginning with because. Is that she was qualified, or is qualified, not is because she's qualified. And another no-no are dangling modifiers. So modifiers must be close to the words that they describe or that they limit. A modifier dangles when the word or the phrase it describes is missing from its sentence. The solution to this is to position the modifier closer to the words it describes or the words that it limits. Okay, so here's an example or a couple examples of dangling modifiers. To win the lottery, a ticket must be purchased. The introductory verbal phrase must be followed by the logical subject. Okay, yes, to win the lottery, a ticket must be purchased, but to win the lottery, who has to purchase the ticket? All right, let's look at this other one here. Driving through Malibu Canyon, the ocean suddenly came into view. Is the ocean driving through Malibu Canyon? No. So, driving through Malibu Canyon, we saw the ocean suddenly, oh, sorry, I'll move this for you, suddenly come into view. So just be careful. Don't drop your subjects. Try this trick for detecting and fixing possible dangling modifiers. Ask the questions who or what after the introductory phrase. The words immediately followed should tell the reader who or what is performing this action. Try the who test up here. Okay, let's look at the first one. So, to win the lottery, a ticket must be purchased. By who? Or, who's going to win? Who buys the ticket? Driving through Malibu Canyon, the ocean suddenly came into view. Who was driving? And then who came into view, or what came into view? So just be careful. Here's a look at some misplaced modifiers. A modifier is misplaced when the word or the phrase it describes is not close enough to be clear. In both instances here in the chart, the solution is to position the modifier closer to the word that it describes. So, seeing his error too late, the envelope was immediately released by Matt. Did the envelope see the error or did Matt? So, seeing his error too late, Matt immediately resealed the envelope. Another example, a wart appeared on my left hand that I want removed. What do you want removed? A wart that I want removed appeared on my left hand. All right. Oh, we have one more, sentence and document editing. Sorry, this is a long lecture tonight. This is the last part, sentence and document editing. All right. So, sentence fragments. One of the most serious errors that a writer can make is punctuating a fragment as if it were a complete sentence, so be careful. A fragment is a broken off part of a sentence. Example, because most transactions require a permanent record, good writing skills are critical. No, not quite. Because most transactions require a permanent record, comma, good writing skills are critical. Let's look at this next one here. The recruiter requested a writing sample even though the candidate seemed to communicate well. All right, what do I got to do? Add a comma. Good. Da-da-da. Fragments can often be identified by the words that introduce them. Words such as although, as, because, even, except, for example, if, instead of, since, such as, that, which, and when. These words introduce dependent clauses. Make sure that such clauses always connect to an independent clause. Don't leave them hanging around. And comma splices. A comma splice results when a writer joins two independent clauses with a comma. Independent clauses may be joined with a coordinating conjunction, the fanboys, or a conjunctive adverb like however, consequently, therefore, and the other was. Notice that clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction require only a comma. Clauses joined by a coordinating adverb require a semicolon. These are important instructions. Clauses joined by a coordinating adverb require a semicolon, whereas those using the fanboys only need a comma. Here are 3 ways to rectify your comma splices. Oh, I only have 2. Ta-da! A comma splice. Here's an example. Some employees responded by email, others picked up the telephone. Now, you could make this work potentially if you added while others picked up the telephone, but the way it is right now, it's 2 independent clauses. This is a comma splice. So, revision 1, one possibility is some employees responded by email, comma, and others picked up the telephone. Did this use a fanboy or a coordinating adverb? Revision 2, some employees responded by email, however, others picked up the telephone. Did this use a fanboy or a coordinating adverb? So remember to keep your sentences relatively short and to the point. Business readers want to grasp the main ideas immediately. They do this best when thoughts are separated into shorter sentences, but don't become boring. Don't make your writing boring by making all of your sentences 10 words long exactly. Make sure that you vary length. Sentences should be anywhere from 8 to 20 words in length. All right, and that is all for tonight. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in class. Bye.